Okay, as I'm chairing, I'm going to introduce myself, and I'll try and keep up, I'll warn myself if I'm running over as well. Great, I'm Hadrian Pigott, and yesterday the group of us went on what we call the Invisibles field trip, which was looking at the sort of radioactive legacy of the granites. And I think because time's short, I'm going to, the first few slides really whiz through some of the things actually we've seen with other people's slides. So the North Coast mining zone around Batalic, and the field trip then went on to see another of these amazing 3D models that mining engineers have created to understand really what's going on underground. I recommend you go to Geevor. It's an incredible mining museum, and the model they have there is extraordinary. We then went on to Rosevale Mine, which is a small two-adit mine near Zennor, and all of us got underground there, which was pretty exciting actually. It's very good. It's a very safe small mine run by a group of very dedicated enthusiasts, and a bit like Lucy Gunning's experience. I think many of us were fairly blown away by it. It's just, I think unless you go underground and see the working conditions of the people who created these mines, you'll never really understand the endeavour of it. And they're just really quite spectacular places. I can't tell you what this is, but it looked amazing. We were very lucky to have Tony Bennett, who's one of the members of the Rosevale enthusiast group, or the mining society there. He is also the production manager for EGS Energy Limited, who are one of the geothermal companies here, who are hoping to produce a geothermal energy system at Eden project, and Bob and obviously talked a little bit about that as well. I'm going to, what I wanted to do really was talk about the radioactivity of the granite. Granite is radioactive. Uranium, thorium, potassium, and potassium are the main contributors to terrestrial radioactivity. And these elements were concentrated in the granites as the Cornubian batholith formed about 290 million years ago. And then they were reinforced by a series of later mineralization phases as the changing tectonic conditions caused the mobilization of these elements from neighboring deep sedimentary basins. Uranium is actually one of the rarer metals to be extracted in Cornwall. The most common uranium mineral is the oxide uranite, or pitchblende as it's known, and there are a number of exotic secondary uranium minerals such as zippyite, coffinite, torbanite, and zeonite. Now we're going to have a little demonstration about radioactivity, because it's quite unusual, I think, that you can actually find radioactive samples around. So Marcus Perry, who assisted us yesterday, is from the St. Just Mines Research Group, and he's got a little.
I've got a torbanite sample, which is there, and an autunite one,
and a Geiger counter,
and a Geiger counter. All fun. And this is from the cliff over at Batalic.
Fantastic, yeah. So there we go. Thank you, Marcus. Yeah. Okay. So pitchblende was found, uranium oxide ore pitchblende was found in a number of mines in Cornwall, but only 2 mines produce significant quantities of ore. That's Trenwith Mine in St Ives and the South Terrace Mine near St Austell. In total, only about 2,000 tonnes of pitchblende were extracted, and this is a really tiny amount compared to the amount of tin estimated, for instance, which is, and this is not just ore, this is metal, so this is post processing. There were about 2.7 million tonnes of tin produced here, so 2,000 tonnes of pitch blende is really tiny. So originally, pitch blende was thought to be a black copper oxide of no value. So this is 17th century through into the 18th century, and it was really just thrown out onto the spoil tips. But by the early 19th century, uranium was recognised and used for producing vivid fluorescent colours in the glass and ceramics industries. And there was a kind of near monopoly on that from a place in Bohemia, now Czechoslovakia, called Joachimsthal. And that's where uranium was first discovered in 1798. Eventually other factories did set up in France and Germany, to which Cornish pitch blende was exported. But by the 19th century, the end of the 19th century, this business was rapidly declining as other cheaper industrial colours were found. However, in 1896, Henri Bequerel discovered the radioactive properties of uranium. I'm going to race through this actually because of time. It's kind of an amazing image. This is the first auto-radiograph of some pieces of uranium that Bequerel was playing with. And this is actually, this sort of cross shape here is because what he did is he placed the Maltese cross underneath one of those pieces of uranium ore, and it gives this this sort of cross symbol. I mean, to me, that also, I don't know, I might be deceiving myself, but that kind of looks skull-like to me as well for some reason. Quite a frightening image, I think. In 1898, Pierre and Marie Curie discovered radium, and then in 1901, Ernst Rutherford and Frederick Soddy discovered the transmutation of elements and uncovered the radioactive decay chains. So there was this huge scientific leap forward in terms of understanding of radioactive elements at that point. And the news of these discoveries really rocked the science world, but it also rocked other worlds too. And here's Kandinsky in 1902. He says, "In my soul, the decay of the atom was the same as the decay of the whole world. Suddenly the sturdiest walls collapsed. Everything became uncertain, unsteady and soft. And it would not have amazed me if a stone had melted into mid-air before me and become invisible." So radium is 1,000,000 times more radioactive than uranium, but it is extremely rare. So that you need 10 tons of pitch blende to produce, say, 3 tons of uranium. But out of that 10 tons of pitch blende, you'll only get 1 gram of radium. In 1903, the radium craze, as it became known, was well underway. And in 1909, it was probably the most expensive substance in the world. So a gram of radium could be worth £6 to £8 million in today's money. By 1910, in view of the demand from research scientists and the potential use of radium in medicine, factories began to be built in Europe and the USA for its large-scale production. And the radioactive nature of radium led to some real advances in treating cancer. And the original radium, or Curie Therapy as it was known, has evolved into today's sophisticated array of radiotherapy treatments. These are some examples of early attempts to introduce radium in either the form of salts or radon gas in these glass tubes to actually insert that a sort of radioactive charge into the body for localized treatment of internal cancers and so on. We have slightly more sophisticated ways of doing that now, but it's the same principle. This is interesting here. Interestingly, one of the leading radioactivity scientists in Britain, Sir William Ramsay, acted as a consulting chemist to the British Radium Corporation in the 1900s. Unlike Marie Curie, Ramsay had a keen eye for business, and he bullishly oversaw the extraction of radium from pitch blende that came from the Trenwith mines in St Ives, setting up a factory at Limehouse in London to do this. Some 694 tons of pitch blende were produced from Trenwith from 1909 to 1917 to feed this production. Ramsay, as you'll see from this New York Times newspaper heading, also advocated the use of the radioactive waters of the mine for health treatments and therapies. And the idea of St. Ives becoming a spa town was stated, although it was never followed through. The apparent beneficial effect of radium spa waters, as advocated by one of Britain's top scientists at the time, demonstrates the very blurred lines between the true experimental medicine and what can be seen as opportunism or quackery. But a huge range of curious and spurious products were made and sold throughout Europe and the United States, where radium was the miracle element and cure for all ailments. And I mean, I think a lot of you will be familiar with these, this rather mad story. So you have radium cosmetics, radium chocolate, and amazingly, radium condoms. So there was another great use for radium, which was the luminous properties. And so the luminous properties were quickly exploited for a host of gimmicky domestic products, but most importantly for clock and instrument dials. And by 1920, more than 4 million watches and clocks had been produced using radioluminescent paint. In the States, there were up to 4,000 women in factories doing this work. And there were similar factories actually in Britain as well, on the outskirts of London. It was work apparently that women were particularly good at. I'm not entirely sure why that was. But during the 20s, the serious health hazards associated with radium were becoming clear. And the story of the illness and deaths of the radium girls who tipped the brushes with their mouths whilst painting radium onto the instrument dials and clocks had huge coverage and caused global outrage. So in a way, the bonanza days of radium were coming to a close during the 20s. Today, radium is practically worthless, having been superseded for use in radiotherapy by artificial radioisotopes created in nuclear reactors, especially by cobalt-60, which now costs about $1 US for the radiation equivalent of 1 gram of radium. So yeah, radium's out. But between 1898 and 1938, it's estimated that well, probably less than 1.5 kilograms of radium was extracted globally. Nowadays, about 10 kilograms of radium is recovered as an unwanted and hazardous byproduct from the worldwide production of about 30,000 tons of uranium each year. So thus ran the rise and fall of radium, and the extraction of pitchblende in Cornwall followed it, with the last concerted effort to mine uranium at South Terrace coming to an end in 1930. In fact, there was one final extraction of pitchblende, and this took place where we went yesterday with the field trip at Wheel Owls, rather Wheel Edward, and this is a photograph of the production shaft at Wheel Edward on the cliffs there. And this was done by an American mining team who really were looking for radium for atomic research, and I think they spent 2 years there and pulled out a couple of tons of pitchblende. It wasn't a very serious attempt. In fact, what I've discovered is really not quite the end. There's even now a minuscule form of extraction of pitchblende going on, and this would be frowned upon by the National Trust, who oversee the old mine sites. I found this on eBay. This is someone selling low-level radioactive rock samples from the Wheel Owls and Wheel Edward spoil tip, feeding a sort of Geiger counter culture that exists out there. There's a lot of people buying Geiger counters. I bought one. I had to. But I don't know what all the other people are doing. Anyway, so these little samples are being sold on eBay, and so instrument collectors can test the equipment they've got. So this is a 60-gram sample sold for £23, actually. I watched the auction on eBay, and that works out at £383,000 per metric ton. This isn't bad for a bit of low-grade ore, and I can see a new radium rush coming on.